Cliff Richard was married to the same woman for 50 years. She married his best friend instead, then someone else, and finally she died in his arms. He never got married or had kids. He just kept singing while hiding the biggest breakup in the history of British music. In 2014, when the cops broke into his house, they weren't the first ones to hurt him. The BBC had already agreed to something in secret. The claims were not true, but there was real damage. He got thinner. He got chickenpox. He was unable to rest. He said that his own home felt dirty. The man who used to pack Wembley Stadium was now too scared to leave his house. Harry Roger Webb was born on October 14, 1940 in King George's Hospital, Lucknow, British India. The world was already shaking from being at war and going through a change. There was a war going on. Protests for Indian freedom were getting worse. During Direct Action Day in 1946 there were riots and British people started leaving the island. The Webb family was one of them. Harry's dad worked in the colonies, but by 1948 it was clear that the empire was falling apart. They didn't take a car or an airplane though. Instead they took a slow, crowded ship across the Indian Ocean. The SS Ranchi was their raft. A lot of British families, leaving the only home they knew, rode it for 3 long weeks. In the sunshine they were slaves, but in the rain they had to share food. It was cold in England and people were still getting over the war. The Webbs finally moved into a small house in Carshalton, Surrey. The big rooms and warm nights were over. The boy had a rough start after living in comfort, but it made him stronger. He feels like he needs to prove himself and make this strange new life into something bigger after that trip. Soon after, Harry Webb was no longer there. Someone named Harry Grader X was paying close attention. He knew how to handle talented people and spot trends. He told Harry, "You need a rock-sounding name." Cliff, he told her. Firm, British, strong like a cliff face. Then came Richard, a song about the crazy American rock star Little Richard. That was all of Harry Webb. There was a birth. He changed more than just his name. He also changed British music. A song called Move It came out on August 29, 1958. It had a rough, loud and defiant sound. There was nothing like the nice clean pop of the time. Cliff was only 18 years old. It caused a big stir when the song got to number 2 on the UK charts. Teenagers in Britain finally had their own rock star. He didn't copy what Americans did. He was making something fresh. That one song made it possible for everyone else to come. The Stones, the Beatles, and more. It wasn't just the music though. It was the crazy. Britain went crazy when Cliff went on tour that same year. Girls screamed, cried, and passed out. Boys didn't like how he stole the show. The groups were too big for the security guards to handle. It was as crazy as Elvis. But this happened in Leeds, London, and Manchester. This had never seen it happen before. Cliff Panic was the name for it. It was great for the press. They did the same thing. The crazy got even worse in 1959. Cliff let Living Doll go. He didn't want to do it. He believed the song was too weak and fake. "I didn't like it," he told his manager. The band changed it though to a slow country hymn. It became the #1 song for 6 weeks and sold 770,000 copies. In November he got a silver disc. He had a gold by January. Afterwards, Light Up Your Trip. 1 more, plus 5 more weeks. They sold more than 1 million songs between them. That had never been done in Britain before. Hollywood asked to meet. Cliff was in a dark and serious movie called Serious Charge in 1959. The tone wasn't funny. It was about being gay, making fake charges, and tough moral issues. Cliff was only 19 years old. Everyone was shocked when he agreed to join. After a year he was in Espresso Bongo, a movie that made fun of the music business. These parts made it clear that he wasn't just a teen hero. It was his dream to become more than just a singer. That was something British pop stars had never done before. Then the summer break came. It was first shown in London on January 10, 1963. There were 3,000 fans in Leicester Square. Cliff was stuck in his car and couldn't even get out. He missed his own debut that night, but it didn't matter. Before the movie came out in theaters across the country, the music went straight to the top of the UK albums chart. It stayed there for 14 weeks in a row. Many songs from the movie got to #1 like The Next Time, Bachelor Boy, Summer Holiday, and even The Shadows' instrumental and Foot Tapper topped the charts. It was the second biggest hit in the British movie theaters in 1963, after From Russia with Love, and was chosen as the UK's favorite movie star that same year. Then the Beatles came along. Most people thought Cliff would be thrown out. Still, Cliff had 6 top 10 hits in 1964, right in the middle of Beatlemania. The Beatles could only get 5. His hits like On the Beach and I Could Easily Fall in Love with You kept him in the public eye. Cliff wasn't changing anything at home while the Beatles were shaking up music and taking over America. There was a real fight. All over the country, his movies Summer Holiday and the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night came out at the same time. They both set new records. British people didn't forget who came first though. Paul McCartney himself said it. He said that Cliff had everything ready in Britain before the Beatles went for Hamburg. It was clear from John Lennon. In England there wasn't any good music before Cliff Richard and Move It. Something very strange happened in 1965. New Musical Express did a poll of readers all over the world. Fans were asked to name the best male singer in the world. Cliff beat Elvis, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. The Beatles put out Help and Rubber Soul that year. There were still lots of Elvis fans out there. But Cliff won. Why? Because Cliff kept changing. Even though the world around him changed. He wasn't trying to be like the Beatles. He didn't follow the crowd. He mixed up pop songs. Movies that are good for your faith and real charm. He was always the same. That was important to people all over the world. He was their rock before and after the British came. Someone in the music business did something in June 1966 that no one saw coming. Cliff Richard went out on stage at Earl's Court, but not to sing. Instead, he did it to stand next to American preacher Billy Graham and tell a lot of people that he became a Christian. It wasn't just a quiet choice made by one person. People all over the country heard this brave public statement. Fans who thought of him as a British Elvis or Little Richard were shocked. Some people cried. Others just stood there shocked. The man they liked for being radical had changed in a way they didn't see coming. But this moment wasn't just happen. A spiritual trip that had begun 2 years before came to an end. No matter what, doing it in front of Billy Graham's huge crowd in the middle of the 1960s gave it a gravity that no one could deny. During that time, rock stars were not allowed to talk about God. They were supposed to be rebellious, push the limits, and break the rules. People in the culture thought that a pop star should be a lot of different things. People started to worry almost right away. Some fans thought he was done with music for good. Some people in the business thought he might quit and become a teacher. That thought was pretty close. Cliff himself thought about giving up the stage for good. He believed that as a Christian he might not be able to handle being famous. There was talk in music magazines about who might replace him. Agents who booked trips backpedaled. People in the business thought you couldn't be spiritual and a star at the same time. Cliff wasn't sure either for a while. Then something changed. Cliff didn't go away. He stayed. In the process he made something completely new. He kept his faith and kept making songs. He instead found a way to mix the two. While still making it in the charts, he was the first big UK pop star to be open about his faith. That had never been done before. Not like this. He showed that you could have both lives at the same time. If you're honest about what you believe, you can still pack music rooms. This choice wasn't just about keeping your job. It made him different. Cliff later said that his image as a rock star was fake. He didn't have faith. He wasn't really there. That changed when he became a Christian. It made me feel better, he said. My thoughts changed. Being right all the time wasn't important. There was no longer any pressure to play a part. He was free to be himself. He did better with that newfound confidence, even though the Beatles and Mersey beat bands were at the top of the charts at the time. Cliff got stronger while everyone else tried to keep up, because he felt like himself again. But Cliff's career hit a low point in the middle of the 1970s. He didn't have a single song in the charts for the first time in 1975. People began to believe that his time was up. Devil Woman then showed up. He had never done anything loud, dangerous, or dark before this song came out in April 1976. It was a weird story about a psychic and an abandoned cat. The most important thing is that it rocked. It got to number 9 in the UK and number 6 in the US. It was his first time in the top 10 in the US. More than 2 million copies were sold. Cliff came back. What's even stranger? The hard rock fans hugged him. Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton and Elton John were seen backing his comeback record by wearing I'm Nearly Famous badges. These guitar stars showed respect for a man who was once thought to be clean-cut and out of date. One reviewer even said that Cliff's new record was better than Marvin Gaye's best work. They didn't just come back, they changed completely. People now thought the kid from the 1950s was a real rock star. That wasn't all he did. Cliff's first album in over 25 years, Always Guaranteed, came out in 1987. A new pop record that didn't use any of the cheesy sounds of the time and had a classic sound. Because of Thriller, he worked with Alan Tarney again. As a result, a record that sold platinum. It went to number 5 in the UK, stayed there for 24 weeks and sold more than 1.3 million copies. 4 songs from the record made it into the top 40 in the UK. Some people sold so many copies that they went silver. Even though it was the late 1980s, Cliff showed that he could still beat the best. Then there was Christmas 1988. Cliff put out a soft prayer-filled Christmas song called Mistletoe and Wine. In the middle of summer, he recorded it with glitter over the mic. When it came out, the song was at number 7. The next week, it shot to number 1 and stayed there for 4 weeks run. In 6 weeks, it sold 750,000 copies. It was the biggest song in the UK that year, beating out U2, Kylie Minogue and Phil Collins. It had gone silver by 2024, and was still making $100,000 a year in fees. People still couldn't get enough of it after decades. But May 1989 was one of the most amazing times. Put out his 100th song. That was something no other British artist had ever done. He asked 2,000 friends to come to the London Palladium to celebrate. He played them 6 brand new songs and asked them to choose their favorite. He picked The Best of Me, the song that came in second. It got to number 2 in the UK and was certified silver. It also did well in other countries, reaching number 2 in Ireland, number 25 in New Zealand, and number 59 in Australia. It wasn't enough to just get to 100. The goal was to stay current as the business changed over and over again. Cliff Richard's show at Wembley Stadium in June 1989 wasn't like any other. It turned into a full-on show. It was definitely the event that they called it. It was packed at Wembley. A lot of people came to see something other than music. It took me back in time. The first part of Cliff's event took place in the 1950s and paid respect to the TV show Oh Boy, which is where his career began in 1958. Cliff did not act by himself. It was bands like the Vernon's Girls, the Dallas Boys, and the Kalin Twins that he booked. These bands used to rule British rock and roll. Fans in the crowd said it felt like walking into a real-life jukebox. After that, the second half began. That's when Cliff proved he wasn't just acting nostalgic. He sang some of his newer hits with the ease of someone who had been on top of the charts for decades. There were cameras rolling. The show was filmed by professionals and later came out as a live record and TV special. It wasn't just a gig. It was a carefully planned moment in history. Got the highest award the Bright Awards could give that same year, 1989. The most important addition to music. It wasn't just about the prize, though. It meant more than that. He was the first singer in history to have number 1 hits in 5 different decades. The 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and now the 1990s. By that time, he had already put out 100 songs. The 100th was my best, and it shot to the top of the charts. Cliff had 65 top 10 hits and 14 number 1s at that point. Other people didn't even come close. After a year, on June 30th, 1990, there was another big event. Knebworth Park, a huge event to raise money for the Nordorf Robbins Music Therapy charity. The Shadows were Cliff's band, but they were only one part of a famous group. Genesis, Paul McCartney, Elton John, Pink Floyd, and Bruce Springsteen, and Phil Collins all got up on stage. When Tears for Fears started, it rained hard, but the crowd stayed and sang anyway. Cliff stood with rock's biggest stars and showed once more that he belonged. Then December 1990 came along. Savior's Day is a new song that came out. And Chris Eaton wrote it in October 1989. He told Cliff about it at a Christmas party in a Rolls-Royce. It was in the car that Cliff heard the tape and said, "This is a number 1. He was right. At the start of the chart on December 8th, it was number 6. It quickly moved up to number 3 and then number 2. It became number 1 on December 23rd and pushed Ice Ice Baby off the top. The video was made at Durdle Door in Swanage in sunny September. It showed people dressed for winter and thinking it was Christmas while they were sweating. The end result was amazing though. The speed didn't slow down. Around that time, Cliff put out a best hits record called Private Collection, 1979, 1988. It went platinum more than 1.2 million times. It was his most successful record ever. Songs like We Don't Talk Anymore, which has sold over 5 million copies around the world. In Britain, his name kept coming up on every radio. This wasn't just a throwback. He sold more than new pop acts. He was in charge of a business that was moving quickly. Things went in a strange direction after that. Cliff put out the Millennium Prayer in 1999. A lot of radio stations didn't like it. BBC Radio 2 wouldn't put it on their playlist. It wasn't liked by many, they said, but they still played Tina Turner and Cher, who were both about Cliff's age. Old bands like the Beatles had already been dropped by Radio 1. Chris Evans of Virgin Radio once said Cliff was too old. It was against the rules for DJs to play the song. Fans were very angry. Cliff's fan club even held a protest outside of the BBC. He felt like the business world had turned its back on him. The miracle then happened. The Millennium Prayer became a hit even though it didn't have a big company, airplay, or a machine behind it. Not for a week, but for 3. His 14th UK #1, it ran from November 28, 1999 to December 19, 1999. It was 40 years after his first. Fans bought more than one copy. It had backing from churches. It wasn't just a hit, it was a protest. Cliff was able to get around the rules, and it wasn't just in the UK. The song got to #2 in Australia and New Zealand. More than one country in Europe put it in the top 20. It was given platinum rank by 3 countries. No big radio play or heavy advertising. Just people who liked the song. The Children's Promise charity got a lot of money from it. Cliff had shown that you could believe in yourself, get money, and still be at the top of the charts. Aside from music, Cliff had a personal life with its own stories, some of which were very sad. Its Cliff Richard was in 1971, and he had a young Australian singer called Olivia Newton-John on the show. 22. They hit it off right away and became close. Afterward, Cliff said, "I knew she would be a friend for life." He was right. For more than 50 years they were close. The world wouldn't know that Cliff loved her until his book came out in 2020. He wrote that Olivia was engaged to someone else when many of us were in love with her. "I missed my chance." Cliff never got married. Olivia seemed to have left a mark that would never go away. He also said that everyone who knew her fell in love with her in the end. The fact that she was engaged made the story even more interesting. Bruce Welch, Cliff's bandmate who stays out of sight. In 1968, Olivia met Bruce when she was running the show. The beginning of their friendship was very tense. Bruce was still married. Their relationship made the news. They were going to get married for 5 years, but they never did. Olivia was working closely with Cliff the whole time. She went on tours with him and sang with him. Bruce became depressed and even hurt himself after she finally left him in 1973. There were rumors. Did she fall in love with Cliff instead? No one ever said it out loud, but it was very quiet. Cliff and Olivia kept working together even though they were having a rough time. Fans still remember the songs they sang together for more than 40 years. A Surprise from Xanadu, their 1980 hit, was just one of many. In live shows they also played When I'm 64 Inches and other favorites. Cliff often said that Olivia had an ease that no one else could match because of how well their sounds went together. Cliff's 75th birthday show at Royal Albert Hall in October 2015 was where they sang their last song together. They sang One Last Time all of a sudden. Cliff's 2023 record Cliff with Strings was My Kind of Life. As a way to honor Olivia, he used that live tape. The tough part then came. Cliff called Olivia 3 weeks before she died. As always, she was happy, warm, and positive. "Hi Cliff, how are you, sweetheart?" she said. She didn't sound like she was going to die. After the call, Cliff wrote, "I never thought for a second that I'd be writing this." Olivia had fought breast cancer for 30 years. She fought hard, but she never showed how much she hurt. Cliff was crushed when she died on August 8, 2022. He said, "I hate that word," which meant death. He said she had just stopped living instead. It helped him deal with the silence she left behind. Cliff Richard was having a good time at his home in Portugal on August 14, 2014, when he turned on the TV. He could not breathe after seeing what he saw. Watching live on TV, planes were flying around his home in Berkshire, and cops were going through his things. His first thought was easy but scary. It looks like thieves, but it wasn't a break-in. A full-on police raid was shown on TV all over the world, because the BBC and South Yorkshire cops made a secret deal. The BBC knew about it ahead of time. Inside the team, they even called it the money shot. They wanted a show. They got it, plus Cliff Richard was wiped out. He had been a singer for decades and was a national treasure. He was 77 years old at the time. He broke down in tears on his knees in the kitchen. Pictures were seen all over the world, from Australia to the UK. Cliff cried as he read out loud in court the list of countries that had shown video of his private life going down the drain. Afterward, he said that the worry made him think he was going to have a heart attack or stroke. It all began with a single accusation. There was a man in his 40s who said Cliff had hit him at a Billy Graham meeting at Bramall Lane Stadium in 1985. There were a lot of people at that gathering. 200,000 people came over 5 nights. On stage with Graham, Cliff backed the Christian cause he had been fighting for since 1966. But the charge quickly fell apart. The man talked about a room with sports gear where the claimed attack took place. What's wrong? In 1985, that room didn't even exist, and the sports stuff was kept in a different place. The cops still looked into this for 22 months. They didn't pay attention to what their own cops who were guarding Cliff that night and were with him the whole time said. Plus, they weren't even talked to. It took almost 2 years to finish the study. Cost taxpayers $800,000 and didn't lead to any charges. Not a single thing. But the harm was already done. The BBC then put in an entry for Scoop of the Year, as if the live raid and endless news stories weren't enough. In fact, the presenter put Cliff's raid video into an award contest while he was still being investigated. The BBC got an extra $20,000 and increased damages because of that ruling alone. The court said it was rude and embarrassing. Behind the scenes, the number of deaths kept going up. Cliff afterwards said that he had become depressed. He had trouble sleeping some days. He sometimes couldn't even raise his arms. Shingles came on him. He got thinner. He fell because he was too tired. He said he didn't feel safe in his own home anymore. It became hard for him to do even simple things, like putting out a record or promoting his book. Everything stopped. People didn't see him as a person. They saw him as a story. It was one of the strangest times ever after that. A man tried to seize Cliff's money right after the raid ran. He told them they owed him money and said he would spread lies if they didn't pay him. Though that man was caught, his first claim of sex abuse was still taken seriously by the police. Someone tried to get Cliff to pay money by using the raid, but he was still seen as a real victim. Cliff finally got $400,000 in damages from the South Yorkshire police, who admitted that telling the BBC about what they did was illegal. They said sorry in public. Although saying sorry and getting a large settlement do not erase the pain that was caused, neither do court payouts. They did it. The BBC had already paid Cliff $2 million in damages, but they also had to pay lawyers' fees. Cliff wasn't happy with how the attorneys wrote their ruling though. The CPS said there wasn't enough proof to press charges. That wasn't enough for Cliff though. He wanted it written down. There wasn't even a shred of proof. That cloud of doubt, the thought that something might still be there, was what scared him the most. He said, "I feel like the BBC, not the police, has smeared me." Even though he was found not guilty, he broke down again in court as he talked about his fear of being dirty forever. Even though he wasn't guilty, he told the MPs that being known to the public had made it hard for him to look people in the eye. That the harm had been done no matter what. People would always be curious. He had every reason to believe that. On the front pages, his name was written all over. Police showed his face as they took away proof that didn't mean anything. His whole life's work had been summed up in one raid and one story. There was a media show. He won his case against the BBC in July 2018. Cliff had a right to privacy, and the judge said that the BBC had seriously and sensationalistically broken that right. After that decision, the British media could no longer report on police cases in the same way. Cliff never just wanted to win. Though, it was about getting through, about telling everyone that what happened wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't right. He never got those 2 years back. It was always in the news. People would stare at him, and he always felt like his name, no matter how clean it was, would always have a shadow over it.